I am William Wright.
And I'm Hattie.
And this is our podcast, What Are We Doing? And we are continuing on our theme of emotions for 2020. And we are looking at the emotion of loneliness.
This month, yeah.
Yeah, this month. So it's kind of weird. Like, it's funny that we're doing like emotions in the year 2020 with the pandemic and everything. And I bet everyone's kind of just going through a range of emotions.
Yes.
And it's definitely like, I bet people are feeling more loneliness in this time of being in a pandemic. But yeah, what do you think? Like when someone says, "Are you feeling the emotion of loneliness?" Like, where you?
Well, first, I feel like you're absolutely right about the pandemic. I know that I can be very social, but I'm also introverted. Like, I don't need social interaction to feel fulfilled, right? Like, there's plenty of times where I'll be like, it will fill my emotional cup to just do my own thing and not have any plans, you know, like all this stuff. But I certainly, throughout this quarantine, like we've been quarantining since March in North Carolina, and then when we moved here, and especially now as we've moved here to Arizona, like I interact with people at work through video calls, phone calls, like little text messages, whatever, but it's just not at all the same. And I have gotten to feel a little bit lonely for social interaction. Like, I'm so thankful that we are together and we can fulfill that need for each other, but so I can only imagine what people are going through that maybe don't have a partner at home with them.
Yeah.
And are truly, like,
single,
they live alone,
yeah.
and truly single. Or people that are elderly and live in the homes, and the nursing staff that helps them is there, but they are not able to receive the normal visitors that they would otherwise get, visits from their family, stuff like that. You know, that can be super lonely. So I just think there's a lot of truth to what you just said about, I'm sure in the pandemic, rates of loneliness are higher than they otherwise would have.
Yeah, it's funny, like, when I think of just loneliness, like, although, like, I have, like, 4 younger siblings, a bunch of different cousins, like, I've always, I wouldn't say I see myself, like, as a loner, because I'm definitely not a loner, but I've always kind of had a sense of, like, loneliness, if that makes sense. And so now that it's kind of, I'm not as bothered by it. Like, I was perfectly fine in March, literally, like, when we started back with school, like, just kind of hanging out by myself, like, not really needing interactions with others. Of course, I had interactions with you,
yeah.
so that probably masked
helps,
it.
yeah. And I would say that's only for me. Like, I don't need it, but I'm getting to the point where I miss it sometimes. Whereas the first 6 months of the quarantine, like, I wasn't even missing it. I was just like,
it's time to
doing
get work
my own
done.
thing. Yeah, like, it's fine. But I do think, at least for me personally, having you has really helped me, because I recall when I it wasn't a study abroad, but it's very similar. When I was in graduate school, I earned a fellowship to go work on research in Sweden, and that was a fabulous experience. There were many parts that were amazing, but one part that was tough for me was I dealt with a lot of loneliness, and part of that came from knowing very few people when I was there, not speaking the language. But everyone that I worked with there was very welcoming and inclusive. So that was an excellent experience. The problem was that I was there during the summer, and the way the culture is there, partly because of the sun, right? They're so far north that in the summer they'll have 23 hours of daylight, and in the winter they'll have 23 hours of darkness, that when it is daylight, they're like, we're not working, we're going on vacation. And because, you know, we've saved, like, their culture just takes large vacations in the summer.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't just be like, I'm gone for a week. It's like, I'm gone for 6 weeks. So the whole second half, I was there for 3 months, and the whole second half, almost everybody was gone. So it wasn't, like, it was really just me.
So did they kind of give you, like, they just kind of gave you a key and it's like, here's the grocery store, and we'll see you when we get back.
Well, so yeah, I did have access to the building, and another very interesting thing about their culture, and I don't know if this changes in the wintertime or if this is a year-round phenomenon, but because everybody values the summertime and going out and just being outside and enjoying the sun, they highly discourage, like, working extra hours, right? So it'd be like 5 p.m. and everybody would be leaving, and I might be there trying to finish something up, and everybody's like, why are you not in a rush to get out the door? You know, and to the point where at 7 p.m. the lights in the building shut off, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it's not a, oh, you just have to wave your arms, or like, oh, just go turn on the switch. It's like, no, the building shuts down because they're not expecting anyone to be there.
Yeah.
And they're actively discouraging people from being there because it's
they
like,
turn the power off.
Yeah, well, it's like there's in their mind, like, there's no way in heck anyone would still be here.
Yeah.
So we're going to save a bunch of money and be more environmentally friendly by turning the power off. So that was just really interesting, right? Like, here in America, that would, like, oh, like, you're staying later, like, you go, you know.
You'll get a nice extra bonus.
Or that might just be the expectation, right? Like, bonus or not, it's like you're supposed to work yourself into the ground. So anyway, it was just a very different culture, and that led to, I was a little, I wouldn't say extremely lonely when everybody was there working, because I would interact with them during the workday, and there were several women that I formed close friendships with, and we would spend time on the weekend, like, so I didn't feel too lonely at that point, but it was when everybody left that I was suddenly
kind of set in.
Yeah, and I would say it was like, not, yeah, it took a little bit of time to set it, but I think part of it too was feeling like an outsider, which I think is different than, like, I think that helped induce the loneliness, but it was more that as opposed to just not having anybody. Like, if I had been in America, in a city where I didn't know anybody, I don't think it would have been the same. Like, I don't think I would have experienced the same loneliness. And I think part of that was feeling, you know, I don't speak the language. And granted, the Swedes are very good. Like, I could walk into any establishment and the employees would know very good English and be able to speak to me. But it's not, obviously, it's not like they walk around speaking English. Like, that's not their native language. And their culture is also very different from Americans in terms of, like, if you ride the city bus in America and you sit down next to somebody, more likely than not, a small conversation is going to strike up, right? Maybe the conversation is 10 words. Maybe it lasts the whole bus ride, but more likely than not, some words are going to be exchanged, right? Well, they don't have that at all. Like, it comes across as they're being cold, but that's, in their perspective, they don't see it as being cold. Their perspective is just, I'm never going to see you again. Why would I put any effort into getting to know you?
Yeah, I
right?
think that's
so, like,
also some of your personality, and that, like, you get.
I am a very outgoing person, yes, but I also feel like, independent of my personality, that's also typical of American culture.
I would not, like.
There's small talk going. Small talk is very common in American culture.
Yeah, but normally it's small talk, like, when you, like, I guarantee you most people that get on a city bus, there's not, like.
You would at least say hi to the driver. Like, you walk in, hey, how you doing? Good, you know. when we take the bus to the airport at RDU, thank you, you know, like just like
But
it's
that's
none of
like
that
saying
happens.
thank you. Like,
Yeah,
I
but
don't
that
think
doesn't
that's-
happen in Sweden. It's not even that. Like it's just dead silent.
But I wouldn't classify that as small talk.
Okay.
I don't know. I think
Anyway, the point is, some exchange takes place. Not like think about when we check out at the grocery store. You know, we're making oh, I like your mask. Oh, thanks. And then there's like a whole exchange. That's not just me. Like that happens commonly.
And you think those exchanges help make Americans not feel lonely?
No, I think that the lack of those exchanges contributed to me feeling like an outsider in Sweden. I have no idea if it makes Americans feel lonely or like whatever. And there are other aspects of the culture. Like I don't want to just say it was small talk, right? But just the concept of feeling like I am an outsider, like stranger in a strange land type thing. And it was great. I loved traveling, I loved learning and experiencing the culture, but it did get a little lonely there. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, like I've always been somebody that like loved sports, and I could literally like, especially when I was a kid, like if there was sports on TV, I could sit there all day and just watch the sports.
Still do, still can.
But it's not like it's
nothing
not
wrong with it. It's just you're like when I was little, I'm like.
Yeah, it was when I was little. I don't think like now I don't see myself just sitting all day watching sports like on the weekends and stuff. I guess you would disagree, but
I'm not passing a judgment. There's nothing wrong with it, but
no, but I would
just
say
don't feel like you do the same amount. Okay.
And just I think because I enjoyed sports so much, and there weren't very many other people in my family that like just like enjoyed sports to the degree that I did, and I think that like just created a lot of like I was always like athletically inclined and doing athletic events and stuff like that. So like that for me that created some loneliness and thinking about like the emotion of loneliness, and I kind of got used to like, all right, like, I don't need anybody else to like be interested or like want to do these things.
So you were saying you felt the loneliness came from having an interest in these items and nobody shared that interest with you. And in response, you learned to not need anybody to share that interest with you. Okay. But before you learned that response, would you say that it caused you to feel lonely?
No. I would say that like because I had those interests, I was oftentimes like I didn't mind going to do them by myself.
Oh, because you were so interested in that.
And so that like going to do those things by myself, or like every now and then I could find like one or two other like family members, but like I would say like having those experiences, like going to like band camp and things like that, where like I was even at band camp, like
one time at band camp,
even like going to like band stuff, like there was always like, all right, I have to get from my middle school over to my high school, and like I was walking alone, like so like I would spend a lot of time with myself and with my own thoughts. Or like there'd be times where like my grandmother Catherine stayed close to my high school and middle school, and so there'd be times like on the weekends where I would go from like the school and just walk to her house, and so like just there were a number of different times where like I was by myself because of like the extracurricular activities that I was involved in, and that kind of made me like kind of okay with like being lonely. And like I think now there's definitely like a stigma that like when you're alone, or at least I have a perceived stigma of loneliness as kind of like you're
Wait, you have a perceived stigma, or you perceive that the culture has a stigma? Like, do you share the stigma or not?
I would say like I share the stigma, but like it's not for me. Like I don't identify with it. If this is making any sense. Like I see that our culture sees loneliness as kind of like a depressive state.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how our culture sees that, but I don't necessarily share like that viewpoint that just because somebody is lonely.
Yeah, so you recognize that the stigma exists, but you don't subscribe to it. And I feel the same. Like I think there's a lot of people that would imagine like, oh, they're single, they must be so lonely all the time. Or like, oh, they have to do this by themselves, that must be so lonely. Whereas I think you and I both enjoy doing things by ourselves a lot of times. And like you were saying, there's been times in your life where you didn't have anyone really to share the thing with you. So whether you would have wanted someone or not, like it was just you, and you learned to be fine with that.
Yeah, I once had it's funny. I once had a coworker that said he loves like when his wife goes out of town because he can like go to the movies, just go by himself to the movies and maybe watch a double feature.
Good for him. Yeah, enjoying. I think too that parts of society have kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say taught us, but just like you're talking about that stigma, like they expect that if you're doing things alone, you must wish that somebody else was doing it with you. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Like I think a lot of people are introverted and enjoy having alone time. Other people do not enjoy having alone time, but I don't think you can make generalizations across everything. So you did say though, when you were growing up, you wouldn't consider yourself a loner, but you felt loneliness. You went on to explain more recently that you didn't, from what I understood, you said you didn't actually feel loneliness. You learned to enjoy things by yourself. So would you say that you felt a lot of loneliness growing up, or would you say that you learned pretty quickly that you could enjoy things?
I would say there were I definitely like felt loneliness. I think it was like loneliness in that like I'm the only one that like understands this, or maybe it's just more I'm the only one that like feels this.
Feels what?
Well, just like whatever. Like, I'm the only one that like wants to sit here and watch football from like sun up to sundown. I'm the only one that like wants to go and dribble the basketball up and down the court. Like, just like those feelings of like I'm the only one that wants to do this, so like I gotta do it. Like, I gotta be okay with doing it by myself.
So I guess I would describe loneliness as the feeling of being alone and not wanting to be alone. Whereas like you're missing either a specific person or you're missing other people, but the feeling of like I'm by myself and I want to not be. Whereas what you just described to me is not, it's very similar but not necessarily exactly the same. Like when you're doing the activity and it's like, oh, I'm dribbling the ball up and down, I wish somebody else was here with me, that I would classify that as loneliness. But the concept of I seem to be the only one that wants to watch this or that wants to do this, that could contribute to feelings of loneliness, but I don't particularly see it as that particular thing being loneliness. More of
I guess like
feeling
I would have definitely I would
feeling
have definitely loved to like had somebody up there to do those things with me, but there wasn't.
Right. So
yeah.
If you wanted to do them that bad, you were going to have to do them by yourself. So I mean, like I said, I can totally see as that part as being lonely.
And I think like that was once I kind of got to like high school and started playing like football in high school. Like a lot of our time, a lot of that like lonely. A lot of times of like maybe I felt loneliness, like football kind of took up those
Filled the
gaps because we were very like intensive, like long hours, like.
Right. I'm sure A, it took up a lot of time.
Yeah.
But B, now you had a whole group of people, not just one.
Yeah.
Like a whole football team's worth of first string, second string, you know, of people that had the same interest and the same desire to maybe not spend the exact same amount of time, but to spend a substantial amount of time working.
And like it was a requirement to spend a substantial amount of time.
No, I understand that. But it's very different to be like, oh, I found one other person that likes this too. It's like, oh, there's a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go be doing this. So have you felt loneliness in more your adult life or not really?
I would definitely say I have. Like, there's definitely like been times I feel like when I first I left Presbyterian College and first went back to Duke for grad school and to work with the football program. There were definitely times of like loneliness through that whole transition, and just kind of like I think anytime you move to a new place, there's always like a period of loneliness that's inevitable for you to go through.
Because I do think there's something to be said for, again, I might not classify it as loneliness, but it's like the unfamiliarity. Like you're lonely for the familiarity with the place. Like you're lonely to understand it and know it and
yes.
You know, like,
and I definitely feel that even here, like moving to Arizona, like
like we don't know where the good haircutters are. We don't know, you know, like, and just coming up with places to eat out, like order our food. And just that sense of, I wouldn't even call it community, but just sense of belonging to
the area.
The area, like geographic community. Like I don't know how to describe. But I can also see, especially when moving to a new place, there being feelings of loneliness of belonging to a community. Of actual people, independent of the geographic places.
Yeah, and I would definitely say that, like, and I'm thinking now, like, because with my comment of every time you move, like, every time I have moved, like, I had to, like, find a new community to be a part of.
Right.
Even if I, like, kind of knew the area, like I still had to find like a new community. Like even moving from like one apartment to like a house in Durham, like it was still, I had to like kind of build a new community. Yeah. I guess the only time it was not really that was when like you and I moved in together. That was kind of, the community had already been set. It was good.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think, like, even for me, from undergrad to grad school, I didn't move anywhere. I stayed at Duke, but my community left, right? And not the entire community, but I was a little more familiar with the geographic place, but all the people were new, you know, that I would be spending time with as a grad student, which would have been the same if I had gone somewhere else. So yes, it was an easier transition because I was familiar with the place geographically, but there was only like one or two people that I had known before that were, I would actually say, was like part of my community. So I think there is something to be said for moving and transitions, like whether or not you actually move to a new place, there still might be some of this sense of needing to find and establish a new community that people may not think about, right? Like, oh, you stayed in the same place, like how would you feel lonely? It's like, well, all my friends left. Yeah. You know, like I had to get a whole new group of friends, like, so, yeah. So do you what are the types of things that you do in response to hearing that somebody else is lonely? Or
Well, I don't know if I really hear that other people are lonely. Like I can't think of a time in my life where I've been like, oh, somebody's lonely, so now I'm gonna try and help them out. Have you?
I wouldn't say a ton. I mean, I think it comes up a lot in romantic relationships. Like after a breakup, someone might be lonely. It's like newly single, and so you spend time with them. But again, I'm not so sure that's. I think some of it, and it depends on the person, right? Some of it is loneliness, as from my definition before, they want to be with someone and they can't. Like, but part of it also may be kind of that loneliness for the familiarity of.
I've had this thing.
Yeah, and maybe it isn't what I wanted, but at least I had these certain things known. Whereas now I'm open to the unknown, and that's a little overwhelming and scary. So I do think that loneliness is a complicated emotion because it may not be just for people, but it can be for situations, places, all this stuff, but that it's like a linker to other emotions, right? So it's rarely is it, I'm only feeling loneliness. It's often also combined with fear of the unknown, like sadness and grief at the loss, or maybe it's excitement at the change, but you're also still, like we came here, I was very excited for the change, but we're still in a new place that we don't know about, and right? And so I think that, at least in my personal experience, loneliness isn't experienced in isolation. Like there's often a lot of other things that you're
contributing.
Feeling, that may be contributing to the loneliness, or that the situation that's causing you to feel lonely is also causing you to feel some of these other things that may be positive or negative. And that can easily get like wrapped into the loneliness.
Yes. And I think like your description of like loneliness, like being a connector with other emotions, it makes it so hard to like identify.
Yes.
And also like it makes it like the decision, like because loneliness is connected to other emotions, like the decisions that you make like can't be attributed to like loneliness. And then like the decision that like you may be making, say like, oh, like I just got out of a relationship, and you go to like, you knew that was a bad relationship and you wanted to like get out of it, but because of the loneliness or like your heartbreak or whatever, like that this is a bad situation,
or the fear of being just on your own, like maybe not necessarily that you want someone else around, but where am I gonna live if I live with this person? Like, can I pay for my groceries? That sort of thing.
And so that leads you to like that loneliness connected with all those other emotions can lead to like complicated decisions.
Yes, agreed. And I think it also leads to like another example when talking about relationships. It's like, maybe someone gets out of a long-term relationship, they're upset about it, and they jump into something new, and they're still feeling unfulfilled. And they can't figure it out because they're like, well, now I have this great new relationship. Why am I still really sad? Or why am I still not feeling how I'd expect to be feeling? And it's like, well, because you fixed a problem that wasn't actually the problem, right? Like you being by yourself or not in a relationship wasn't the problem. The problem was feeling that like intimacy, or maybe the problem was feeling something else, right? Depends on the situation.